Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Carlos Juarez. I am co-chair of StartOut's Access to Capital Programming Board. I'm excited to welcome you to Demystifying the Accelerator experience, StartOut in YC and Y Combinator. Just quickly, a few words about StartOut. So StartOut is a US-based nonprofit organization founded in 2009 that focuses on supporting LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs and startup founders. Our mission is to increase the number, diversity, and impact of LGBTQ entrepreneurs, and also amplify their stories, ultimately to drive the economic empowerment of the queer community. Over the past 10 years, we have built a community of over 18,000 members, and we support over 300 entrepreneurs each year. In essence, StartOut is about networking, entrepreneurship. Sorry, I'm juggling the waiting room. Entrepreneurship and community. If you're a founder, we provide direct individual support through community events, one-on-one mentorship, one-on-one office hours with experts, and a 6-month accelerator program and investor connections. A quick thank you to our sponsors. And with that, I'll hand it over to Nick.
Thanks so much, Carlos. I love seeing all those sponsors. It's amazing. Maybe one day, one of these folks will be up there, big and strong. All right, so my name is Nick Vivian. I've been working with StartOut on the program board for a couple of years now. I do PR and communications for brands, mostly in the Web3 crypto space these days. And I'm really excited about this session. We did one last year, and it just makes me really happy to be able to showcase these types of topics and really get into the heads of founders who have successfully entered Y Combinator and other accelerators, because when you have the right fit with the right accelerator, it can do exactly what's in the name and it can accelerate you. But as I think we're going to find out also through these discussions, it can also have other effects too. And so we want to make sure that you are applying well and applying for the right reasons. So with that, I would like to just start with Kat. Maybe you could do a quick introduction, and I'll have you just go ahead and give the background of Y Combinator, and then we'll do introductions with our two founders right after you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. And it's great to meet you guys. I'm going to can I get a quick overview? How many of you, how many of you are already working on a startup? Type 1 in the chat if you are, just so I get a sense. Cool. Okay. Awesome. And then how many of you have already applied to YC? Type of 2 if you already have at some point. All right. All right. And then can you talk a little bit about, tell me who doesn't know much about YC? Type of 3 in the chat. All right. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm going to do a really quick intro to YC. I'd love for you to spend most of this time, hearing from the founders that are going to be talking today and asking us questions. So I'll just do a quick overview. I'll share my screen really quickly. 1 second. All right. So you can see this. Cool. So I'm going to do a quick, quick overview is, at YC, twice a year, we invest in hundreds of founders who join us for a 3-month program focused on helping their startups.
Hey,
oh, yep.
Pull it into the presentation mode. It's kind of.
Oh, sorry.
This is teeny mode. This is like my glasses are strong, but I might need more.
Oh, wait. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong one. How's that?
Slideshow. There you go. Yep, you got it. There you go.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
Sweet.
Let me do 1 second. I have both of these. Let me stop sharing quickly and then reshare the right one. It's always the awkward screen sharing moment.
It's always something, right?
Yeah. Okay. Let me share now. And so you can see that, right? And it's big.
Absolutely. Yep. It's all good.
Cool. Okay. So at YC, we have 2 batches a year, one January through March and one June through August. And we invest in, hundreds of companies per batch now. And we accept open applications. You can apply, it's free, and essentially you can apply from anywhere in the world. I'll give you a quick background on myself. So prior to YC, I worked at Wired Magazine. I started my career there. And that's sort of where I fell in love with startups. This was in the 2008 timeframe. So I got to meet the early founders of Airbnb, the early founders of Kickstarter. And I loved how fast moving they were, how ambitious they were, how they really wanted to do these like world-changing things. And while I was at Wired, Reddit had been recently acquired by Condé Nast, our parent company. So back then, Reddit was only maybe 5 people, and I ate lunch with them every day. And I became really good friends with the early Reddit team and Alexis Ohanian, the founder of Reddit. So we would pitch each other startup ideas. And at a certain point, I asked Alexis Ohanian, the co-founder of Reddit, what do you think I should do? And if you guys get to know more startup founders, you realize they all become startup pushers. And so, Alexis at the time was like, hey, you should really start your own startup. And I was like, I'm not ready. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. And he said, well, you should work at one. So he got me a bunch of interviews with a bunch of YC founders. Reddit was actually the very first, in the very first batch of YC in 2005. And then midway through that process, he said, wait, I'm starting my own fund and nonprofit. Would you like to come work with me? And I joined him, and I learned from him a lot about online community building, a lot about how to help very early stage startups get launched and started. And so I worked with him for a couple of years and then joined YC in 2013, where I became the first director of outreach. These days at YC, I am now, I head up the outreach team, which means everything from press, social media, content for early stage founders, and I'm part of the admissions process. So, these days we get around 15,000 applications every 6 months. So we read those applications, we interview the teams, we fund them, and help them as they grow. All right. So some really quick stats on YC. We funded at this point about 4,000 companies. And I did the math right before this call, and I've seen about 3,500 of those companies go through YC since I started. We have about a 1.7% acceptance rate across the board. Between all 4,000 companies, they've raised about $70 billion. And then there are now 70 companies in the YC community that are worth over $1 billion and over 260 that are worth over 150 million. So, a lot of our companies, some of the top companies are listed here. You might recognize some like Airbnb and Stripe, but there are many, many more in the community that are fast growing and, will hopefully become household names soon. So there are some well-known advantages of YC that I'll just run through really quickly. We have this open application process. We've sort of been described as a university for startups. So anyone, anywhere in the world can apply, and it's free. You don't need to know anyone, and you don't need any recommendations from alumni, or you don't need to know any partners. For the companies we fund, they now get 500K. So we, every company that gets funded by YC gets 500K, which I think, in this market is especially helpful. You get advice. You work very closely with, 2 or 3 group partners who are dedicated to helping you during the 3-month program. And they are, founders of startups themselves. So they have built and scaled their own companies. And then beyond that, they've seen hundreds, if not thousands of companies go through the YC program. So we can, kind of call out patterns, or if we see you potentially falling into some, into a pitfall or hitting certain challenges, we can share some of what we learned from watching other companies who've come before you. It's reasonably well known that we help companies, raise more money and typically at higher valuations than, where they were at pre-YC. And we hope that we help, the YC companies raise from the best investors around the world. So these days, a couple thousand investors will come from all around the world to watch Demo Day and participate in that process twice a year to get to know some of our earliest stage companies. But there are some secret or less known advantages to YC that I'm hoping you guys will ask some of our alumni who are speaking today about. One is we provide companies with a framework for focus. A lot of companies say that the 3 months of YC is some of the most highly leveraged time in their company's life. It's the time that they kind of sprinted the fastest, and a lot of that is because of demo day, which is 3 months in the future, and we're really trying to help companies get into the best shape possible to raise at that point. And after YC, a lot of our alumni say they try to recreate that feeling, and they'll do these like 3-month sprints. But we help really set up that framework for our founders. We really say during YC, the only things you should be doing are building product and talking to users. And so, we say that, you should use YC as an excuse to blow off all your other responsibilities or plans for at least 3 months. Batchmates and the Alumni Network, I think, are sort of the absolute, best part, secret. Like when people ask me why YC has worked better than like essentially any other startup community or accelerator out there, I really think it is that the founders, Paul and Jessica, Robert and Trevor, set up a great blueprint, but they also set up the basis of an incredible community whose one of our core tenets, I believe, is to pay it forward. So at the beginning of the batch, we tell our alumni, we tell our founders, hey, you should use the next 3 months to call in all the favors, like reach out to as many batchmates and alumni and all the group partners and ask them for help. Like just use as much time as you can. But know that one day founders will reach out to you and they'll ask you for that help as well. And we, hope that our founders will pay it forward and help future generations as well. So we, if you are a startup that sells to startups, why being part of the YC community is incredible, because now we've funded over, almost 4,000 companies who are potential customers. And often you get, your first 100 paying customers from the YC community itself. And we've also built software to make it easy for our alumni to connect. So we call it Bookface. It's like Facebook meets LinkedIn, meets Quora. And it has everything from an alumni directory to help you figure out, which alumni you should reach out to who are, maybe building something in an adjacent space. There are always alumni who are a little bit ahead of you, a little bit behind you. So it should be easy to sort of find a sub community. We have a deals page, which, has, hundreds, if not thousands of deals available to the YC Alumni Network. We have an investor database that includes all the investors that haven't, attended demo day, and I would say most that have invested in YC companies. And it's where our alumni can share particularly good or bad experiences that they've had with investors. And I think that's super helpful to know, sort of like when you're entering that relationship, to have that sort of context from other founders. And also we've sort of built out in the past couple of years our hiring support. So we have something called Work at a Startup that a lot of our earlier stage companies will hire software engineers from. And then as companies grow, and our later stage companies, we also provide some amount of executive hiring support as well. So I think one of the coolest things that has happened since I've joined YC is in the very early days of YC, really for the first 10 years of YC, we were extremely focused just on the early stage program. So, we had the 3-month program and then demo day, and then that was essentially it. Like you could send emails or do some office hours with group partners after, but now YC is really run by YC alumni. So it's people who have gone through the YC program, exited, have become partners at YC. And now we are sort of building a platform and programs that we wish existed when we were first getting started. So now we not only have this, a really robust early stage program and alumni network, but we've more recently launched a Series A program to help our companies as they prepare to raise their Series A post-A program, a growth program. And then, as I mentioned, stuff like Work at a Startup, which helps companies hire as well. So a lot of folks ask me when they should apply. And really, there is no, I'll say for the folks of you who have applied more than once, about over 50% of the people we fund now have applied more than once. So don't let it stop you. Definitely apply again. And as soon as you have a company or idea, I say it's always a good exercise to fill out the YC application because it'll help you clarify your ideas. It helps you have those hard conversations with your co-founder about equity. It gives you a sense of what investors are looking for and how to answer certain questions. And so the next deadline we have, the application is live now, but the next deadline we have for the winter 2023 batch will be in late August. And you can find the application at ycombinator.com/apply. A couple other shout outs I wanted to do were for Startup School. So Startup School is a free 7-week program that we have, and we're launching a new course on June 27th. So if you're in the earliest stages of starting a company, we have free resources online. It's a free class. And we also have something called a co-founder matching tool. So if you're looking for a co-founder, I highly recommend checking it out. It's we've already funded, off the top of my head, at least 5 companies whose co-founders have met in that process. Startup School is this global online community where you can get great feedback and support from other early stage startup founders. And if you aren't quite ready to start a startup, but you're interested in the sort of ecosystem of startups, I highly recommend working at one. And you can check out all of our companies at workatastartup.com, and you can put in one profile and it goes to all of the startups in the YC community that are currently hiring for that role. So definitely check it out. And so I have some resources up here, and you're always welcome to contact me if you have questions about YC or the application process. I'm Kat, K-A-T, at ycombinator.com. Okay, hope that wasn't too long. And then I'm gonna kick it back to Nick.
That was great. I'm glad you did that in record time. Actually, my boyfriend works for a YC company, and I can fully attest to like the long-term value over time of the community, and also some of the great deals that you get from the network of other companies that offer you stuff. So you get a cheaper tech stack. So there you go. That's the operations guy in me making a sale. I'm curious, so before we kind of move on to discussing our kind of experience with founders, is there anything that you see as like I don't like to call things mistakes because I don't think in this context you can really have a mistake, but is there anything you see people doing frequently that maybe is like less than ideal, like maybe being too eager and emailing everyone every day and annoying people, right? Or is it just saying buzzwords, right? Is it an application that's just full of meaningless drivel? What are some of the common things you see?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of the most common mistakes. One is not being succinct. And so, each of us reads maybe like 1,000 applications per batch. And so, we love to see people who can like clearly and succinctly describe what they do in language that anyone could understand. And especially if you're very technical, or if you're in the sciences, for example, you often are used to writing with a lot of jargon or terms that might be heavily used in your industry. But so I would say clarity and brevity is a benefit. I do think that if you've worked with a YC alumni, it is helpful to have, and them really well, and they can give you a positive recommendation. I recommend like reaching out to that person and asking, but a loose or weak recommendation, like just like kind of blanket emailing a bunch of different people who you don't really know, that's probably not the best strategy and not needed. Because, I think something like, about half the companies we fund don't have any recommendations from YC alumni, or, they don't know any of us personally. So you really don't need to have a pre-existing network. And yeah, I think just being yeah, I think clarity and then knowing your numbers and both showing that you're sort of, what makes you as a team stand out. And we look very closely at like how quickly you're moving as well, because often we'll read a lot of applications from founders who are all trying to solve the same problem. And so we're trying to figure out which of these teams is most effective or which of these teams is trying to prove their hypothesis like faster than others. And so if you can show movement and sort of that you're quickly thinking about things and iterating. That's, I think a great thing.
Yeah, just underscoring the 50%, not knowing any one thing. I think that's something people always think, right? Like it helps to know people always in life, and you should have a network. That's kind of the point of StartOut and things like that. But also it shouldn't be a game stopper, right? So I think that's something to remember. Don't be discouraged, but also like, it's not that hard to meet people, right? So also like, maybe just give it a shot, right? So that's a fantastic point. I think an inflection point to do some quick intros for our two founders and maybe discuss some of the things that they felt in their application and maybe go through that process. Maka, do you want to start with just a quick intro?
Yep. Yeah, happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is Maka. My pronouns are she, her. I am the founder of Avocademy. At Avocademy, we help people transition into tech, specifically UX and UI design, and then we help people get great jobs in UX UI design. Do you want me to tell a little bit about my story, or is that a good short?
That's a good start, and then
Okay.
let's go over to Lee and then come back.
Hey everybody, my name's Lee Honeywell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tall Poppy. We help companies protect their employees against personal security threats like online harassment. We're a happy Avocademy customer also. And we were in YC summer 2018, and my pronouns are she, hers as well.
I also like to point out that there's a big moment in your life right now. Do you want to share what is happening to you right now? As far as where you're at and all the people you're meeting.
That's
because I think that's a great.
I don't know if Chris
okay, well that's good.
Yeah, that's
okay. Well, we won't say those things. Happy times.
Yes, good things are happening. Good things are happening. Oh, you might be talking about, I hired my first salesperson. That's also super awesome. So yeah.
I think it's a good moment to celebrate when you start like backfilling the things that you've been doing for years. That is always a celebratory moment.
The best. Yeah.
Get rid of the things that you're not the best at and move on and hire the best at that, right?
If there's like one thing I've learned in 4 years of banging my head against the wall of starting a company, it's the entire job of a startup CEO is to like hire people. And it's such a like corny cliched thing to say, but it's super true, which is like my entire job is to hire people that are better than my job at each part of my job. It's the whole job.
You must have learned that at YC.
Is that a YC-ism? It wouldn't surprise.
It's just a good business practice. Yeah. Well, since we're talking first, like, why don't you just walk through your application process? What you were thinking about. Did you apply multiple times, maybe for this business or other business? And I got same thing. So like, kind of pass it over and just I want to know about your experience with accelerators. Doesn't just have to be YC, but like let's share that experience.
Love this question. So my startup story, I was living in the States, got my green card in February 2018. And I had actually had the idea for Tall Poppy a couple years previously, but I was constrained by immigration. I couldn't start the company. And fundamentally, I decided to start the company, started recruiting co-founders and just sort of getting things going, talking to investors a little bit. I was pretty plugged in to the San Francisco sort of startup scene. So that was like a big advantage I had, but I still was like, I'm a first-time founder. I don't really know what I'm doing. I would love to have some structure around, I'm very much a person who benefits from like external structure, whether it's school or whatever. And I knew a number of YC founders. They really, really recommended that I apply. I applied to YC and one other accelerator at the time, which was a small one, which sadly no longer exists. They were really nice folks. It's a bummer that they don't exist anymore, but I basically like got to the next step with both of them. And I knew that with YC, I had to make the decision right away. So I had to do if I get into YC, do I take it? And one of the pieces of advice that I got from a serial founder friend of mine was, if you're going to do an accelerator at all, treat it like law school. If you're going to become a lawyer, if you're going to do law school, go to the best law school you can get into. Accelerators are like that. If you apply to a bunch of different accelerators, do the best one that you can get into. It sounds sort of obvious, but I think you sometimes see with founders, they do like a bunch of different accelerators. Do one, maybe two. I did both StartOut and YC, but doing YC, if you can get into it, is like a total no-brainer to me. So I applied with very little. We had this idea. We had a very strong sense that there was a market. And I, was coming from a fairly compelling background. I was one of the first security engineers at Slack. I had this really interesting industry experience. The two biggest things for me in terms of my YC application is doing a live interview practice session. The thing that I tell I've done a lot of like interview prep for YC founders. You have 10 minutes Mako was saying before the start of the call, it's like the most, sorry to steal your line, is like the most intense 6 minutes of my life. Is it down to 6 minutes now? Or
No,
is
there were
it,
just so
still
many
10.
questions.
You just
Yeah, there were
finished
just
after you're
so many
done? Yeah.
questions. We finished in 6 minutes.
They ask you really, really rapid fire questions. And when they get the information they need out of your answer, they will interrupt you. And you have to like not be flummoxed by that. You have to be like, okay, that means it's good. Let's go to the next one. So really practicing that, being like super snappy. My friend Boris Jabes, who is the founder of Meldium, which is another YC firm, there's like a Canadian sort of founder group, and he did my interview practice through that. And so I just was able to like nail it on the interview. There's a tool that I'll paste in the chat that somebody has written that's like an interview practice tool. So if you can't find a YC founder to do an interview practice with you, use the tool. It's a very good simulation, even though it's like a silly little web app with a Photoshop of Paul Graham on it. I'm totally talking too much. So, but that was basically our, we applied with just an idea. We had a strong founding team and got in, and the rest is history. So yeah.
I love that. I love the strong founding team too. Always good lessons. Maka, I know we with that 6 minute line, it's still good though. So walk me through that, and then walk me through, then maybe after you kind of do this, all the same question, walk through some of the interview tips too. I think that's a good angle of like helping people understand how they should approach that big moment.
Yeah, so I knew around 2019 kind of the problem that I was experiencing as a designer at a consulting firm, which was just the lack of diversity and me always having to be the person to go to bat for diversity and inclusivity. And I knew I wanted to solve that problem. I tried solving it within the company through recruiting, and then realized like it wasn't like a recruiting problem. It was really like a lack of diversity in the pipeline. So I started this company in 2020. When the pandemic started, I was like, I have so much time. I can't say I don't have time. And I literally Googled like how to start a company. And I found Startup School. So I'll touch on that because you mentioned it, Kat. I found Startup School, and Startup School had like all of these KPI tracking mechanisms and just like a format. So just like Lee, I do really well with just like tracking things consistently. And then through Startup School, I learned about YC. And once I realized what YC was, I was like, oh, there has to be other programs like this. And that's how I learned about Growth Lab by StartOut. So I guess it was 2021, I did Growth Lab, which was a 6-month accelerator program. And once I had applied to YC and Growth Lab at the same time, I didn't get into YC. And I got into Growth Lab. So I did Growth Lab for 6 months. And then I got an email saying, hey, you were in the top 10% last time, apply again. And I literally just, you probably shouldn't do this, but I just copy pasted my application and updated my revenue numbers, which were significantly higher at that point. We had through Growth Lab, we had like 5x our revenue. So I think we were about 160K per month in revenue at that point. And then I did not, at that point, I was still a solo founder. And then YC said something that said, hey, update your application. It's been a while since you first applied. And I updated my application and I added a new video with my co-founder, who's also my best friend of 15 years, but I had finally brought her on board. And that's when we got in. So we just finished the last batch of YC, January through March. And in terms of application tips, I would say really know your numbers. We were generating revenue, so I think it was really important to understand all the unit economics, like not only revenue, but LTV, customer acquisition costs. And our interview was unlike what I had read online about all these interviews. And I also didn't know any YC founders. I was just kind of like, I'm gonna do this. It's for the best of the best. Like I'm just gonna do it. But we knew all of our numbers. I had like stickies all over my screen with all the numbers. And I mentioned earlier, it's a 10-minute interview, but I think ours was over in 6 minutes. Kat was there and they were just shooting questions at us like, what's your LTV? Where are you finding customers? Where is this percentage? And we just answered all those questions and it was over. And I looked at my co-founder and I was like, wow, that was fast and really intense. And we got a call the same day that we got in. So yeah.
One of my memories of your interview, like literally Tim and I looked at each other after you left and we were like, wow, they were really on top of their numbers. Like it was very memorable. Like, yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah. So I would say
how long would you say you prepared for that? Like, did you do lots of live tests back and forth, or what was your preparation like for that?
Yeah, so I think Growth Lab really helped because in Growth Lab, I really worked on an 18-month plan. And like we had all of our numbers. I had tons of spreadsheets. Like I knew lead to sale ratio. Like I just had all the numbers really worked out. So then prepping for YC, the interview, I just found a bunch of questions online and just bulleted all those answers. And then my co-founder just like rapid fired asked them to me like for 2 days on the way. Like I picked her up to go to work and she would ask me the questions and then we did work and then we did that for 2 days. But I think it was more of like, if you know the numbers, if you really know your business, you really know the numbers. The practice was just like saying the numbers for us, right? And like being short in your answers.
That's great. I think also nerves, right? I think it's just, you can know your business, but managing the nerves is always a big piece of this. And not every founder, CEO kind of in that way is like going to be doing that role forever, right? But you have to, as a founder, do things that you're not usually like comfortable with. So I think that's a good lesson. Lee, did you want to kind of expand on that comment that you just made in the chat?
So I get asked this question, Erica in the chat asked about YC's acceptance rates on solo founders, and maybe Kat can speak to what the actual numbers are. I joined I got into YC as a solo founder, and I was definitely asked in the interview, like, so you're a solo founder, what's the deal? And basically my answer was like, I'm a solo founder, I'm very technical myself, but I know what I need to hire out for. Because I get asked this so much, I'm actually like working on a blog post that's like how I think about like, what are the pieces you need to have in place when starting a company? Because I think it's not just like having a technical founder, but there's actually a bunch of pieces. And fundamentally, again, coming back to the like your job as CEO is to hire away all the stuff you do. These are the things that for me, when I look back at my experience, were the sort of core initial things that I needed to get out of my head and into another human. And so thinking about like what are the skills that you have internally of those 5 things to like start the thing? If you can't at least do the basics of those 5 things, then you need a co-founder. But if you got them all, just start by yourself. That's fine. It's totally fine. So someday this will turn into a blog post. For now, it is a copy paste iOS note that I use about twice a week.
I love that. Well, that's
about 10% of the batch or so are solo founders.
That's awesome.
On average,
that's like way higher. Is that higher than it used to be? I feel like that's higher than it used to be.
That's what it's been for a while. So it's sort of a myth that we will not fund solo founders, but the reality is that it is harder because I think you have to do a little bit more to prove that you have all those factors that Lee mentioned and that you can, kind of accomplish a lot on your own. And so I do think, it is a little bit higher of a bar potentially, not just for YC, but convincing, investors in general.
This is a good time just for the audience to like for the next like 5 or like I guess in 5 minutes we'll do breakout rooms so you can ask questions directly. But I also would love real quick to talk about some of the like emotional journey coming as founder, because I feel to me that being a solo founder, the worst part is just that you're alone and that you have no one to share that journey with, and it's so emotional, and I think it requires you to have a big support network, if you're a solo founder. So I'm curious, Maka, if you want to maybe just start talking, give us the gut punch, like tell me the bad stuff.
It's the comment I was going to make while you all were talking was like, it's just really hard to be a solo founder. So whether YC accepts you or not, like you should really find somebody to split these responsibilities with. I started by myself, and then my co-founder started helping me a couple hours a week because she is an ops person and finance person, and ultimately like that factor became so big that she came on full time. But it's lonely, and when you're starting, like the reason I looked for an accelerator was because I was missing community. I was by myself in this like 70 square foot co-working space, and like I had my blue board that I was writing in, and I just needed people to talk to so that my partner wouldn't go crazy from me coming home after work, which was very long hours, and like running ideas by her. So I think the best part of having a co-founder is like having somebody to work through things, because even as a sounding board, if they don't have the same strengths, it's just so powerful. Yeah.
That's great. Lee, what about you? How's that process been as you hire your first salesperson, that journey and getting through some of those tougher moments?
Oh man, yeah, like having that community is so essential. I think having that community and also having a therapist. I was in the last, so there was the former batch director of YC, Amy Buchler. She actually was like trained as a marriage and family therapist, and it like really showed, because I think a lot of her, and she's written, I'll paste a couple of her like pieces of writing and stuff in the chat, but she's got some really good stuff about like understanding yourself in order to like be a good founder. I think a lot of the time when we see stuff in the news about like startup dysfunction and drama, so much of it is that like founders don't have their heads screwed on straight. And when I look at the mistakes that I've made as a founder, a lot of it is like definitely my own neuroses. So make sure that you have that like really, really good interpersonal support. Every founder should go to therapy. It's like one of my life lessons.
There's lots of different types of therapy too. It's finding the therapies that work the best for you, and making sure they're as healthy as possible. It's therapy can be the bar, but also maybe not the best sometimes. That's awesome. I mean, any other like last comments you might want to share before we kind of go into more of the breakout rooms where people can ask questions face to face, or the comments, anything that seems relevant, or maybe something that now that you wish you knew then, when you're specifically around applying to accelerators, whether it was the timing or like the content of the application.
I don't know if I have advice on the content of the application. I do have like kind of a thought that I had as we were setting up for this is running a company is really hard. When things go well, it's even harder. I think a lot of people are really worried about like, what if this doesn't work? For us, we set like crazy goals when we got into YC. We were like, this is YC. We're gonna like create this crazy plan to meet. And the first month, we like beat our 3-month plan. And now we're like just continuously beating. And we're up to like 100 people in the company. There's 8 of us full time. And I think it's a lot of hard work, but having community, like I just want to double down on community. The Growth Lab community came at a perfect time for me of like, that was my therapy, like having just people that were like queer and like understood me at a personal level and then a company level. And now the YC community, in terms of like, we still meet with our small group every month, and like have that sense of community it's been like super valuable for us.
I love that. People never prepare for success. It is so true. It's honestly one of the things that kills the companies more than people realize, is actually that it was going well and they had no clue what to do about it. So you do need to prepare for failure, but you also need to like have a plan in place for when, oh shit, this is going well and I'm winning, but I'm about to lose everything because I can't control my clients, the incoming. So
yeah, we had a really good talk during our YC batch about what happens when things go well. And I was like, I love this. This very much resonates. But yeah, I would just tell people to apply. You never know it's going to happen, and just be prepared for when things go really well.
What about you? What's something else? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, from the application perspective, I mentioned this in the chat, but just for anyone who's not reading there, I think the YC application is a uniquely helpful thinking tool for thinking about the fundamentals of your business. Even if you never hit send, I think it's just a really good exercise in working through the fundamentals of your business. So yeah, Kat mentioned that things reopen in mid-June. Have a look now, whether you apply now or later or literally never. The questions that the application asks you about your business will make you have a better business, regardless of what accelerator you do.
And one closing thought before we go into the breakout rooms for Kat, when it comes to like application reviews, like, is it common or welcome if you do know someone in YC, like a YC founder or graduate, to ask for that advice? Is it too much? What would you recommend on getting help with the application in the sense of reviewing and just making sure that it has a sanity check behind it?
Yeah, many alumni are very willing to help sort of give, read your application and give you quick feedback or advice. And so I think if you do know a YC alum, I think that's super helpful. And if you don't, I think, if you know other startup founders or, anyone else who can kind of give you that feedback, I would definitely try to run it by people and run it by a community, ideally, of other founders. And if you don't have, you guys have each other here in this community, which is incredible. And there's also Startup School, where you can meet other, global early stage founders as well.
Perfect. That's awesome. So what's going to happen now is we're just going to split up into 2 breakout rooms. Kat's going to kind of sync between the 2. And it's a chance just to ask any questions, honestly, ideally, about applications, but it can be any aspect of the founder experience. Like, we're here to just chat and be here for you for whatever you need. You can also keep your camera off and just do written chat, whatever you feel is comfortable. It's not, we're open to whatever. I just want to make sure, my original idea when I did this last year was just to give people a chance to like go face to face as much as possible and get help. So I think Carlos has the magic button that will kick us into various groups. He's going to close the room. Don't do it. It's always tough.